Hello, everybody. Drasco here from 10knorm.com, where my main mission is to help heart-centered entrepreneurs who all know all the business strategies normalize their next business milestone by mastering what's between their ears. And today's episode, we have a real talk segment where I bring in a heart-centered entrepreneur who isn't seeing the consistent, stable growth in their business. And in live on a call, I get to help them break down one specific aspect that's most overlooked in business strategy, which is that of the inner aspect. And today's guest, we have Joshua Panczer, who is an intuitive facilitator who assisted hundreds of people in the rapid self-realization process called the quantum theater. Originally, he was trained in filmmaking. He went on a journey of taking his storytelling to the next level and eventually learned to break through the internal stories through his shamanic role-playing process, which seemed to naturally reveal itself out of his combined passions. And today, he also incorporates the enneagram system into his work, into a holistic view of personality fixations. And he currently lives and works in Park City, Utah. So, Joshua, thank you very much for being on. How are you doing today?
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, appreciate the intro. And yeah, I've been just for I only found out about you a few days ago, but since then I've been really enjoying your vibe and watching some of your materials and yeah, really grateful for everything that you're doing here.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. And, as I was telling you before we started the recording, I always appreciate when people decide to come on and do this because it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. It takes vulnerability and courage. But that's, I think, also what makes it valuable because, it is the real kind of stuff that actually moves us forward. So what I'd love to kind of dive into as we get this started is like, just tell us a little bit more about who you are, why you do what you do, how you got into it, because it seems like there's an interconnecting of a bunch of different skill sets and experiences that go into who you are. So I'd love for you to set us up that way contextually.
Yeah, thanks. I'll start off by saying when I was in high school, I think it was 1997, I went to see The Matrix for the first time. I was actually in line for, I was in line for Star Wars Episode 1, and the line was like wrapped around the block, and this was like, oh my gosh, the new Star Wars is coming out. My friends had like a generator, and we were like playing video games in line for Star Wars and stuff. And I, as just sort of an afterthought, I went to see The Matrix while we were in line, and turns out Star Wars was very underwhelming, and The Matrix blew my mind. And being able to be affected in that way by a story was something I never experienced before. I started writing my first screenplay in high school. I created short films, I think, and then I ended up going to a university for philosophy and film. And then I went to another university for film production. And so the first university gave me a lot of head start on like what really makes a good story. The second university gave me a lot of really practical, hands-on business training, camera training, how to wrap a extension cord, like really practical stuff, working with teams. And then I went on to run a video production company in New York City. And I had a few employees there. We were doing all-nighters for clients that needed something the next day. Eventually, I burned myself out. And I wanted to know why. I wanted to look at what was going on with me, why I was seeing different painful relationship patterns throughout my life. And then I started in probably 2011 or 2012, this intense journey of actually, yeah, let's say 2010, 2011. I'm not great with years. And I started really taking this journey seriously of understanding myself. And I was very, let's say, uneducated about what makes people tick. And so I was starting from scratch and had a lot of incorrect assumptions. I had a lot of arrogance, and I had made some movement in my life because that arrogance had blinded me to real issues that now actually we're probably going to be talking about, these real issues that are really under that foundational arrogance. And so in this process, I worked with 12 Jungian archetypes from the, what's it called? The Carol Pearson book called Awakening the Heroes Within. These are like the orphan, the warrior, the lover, the sage, the ruler, the fool. And I took these archetypes and I started doing mirror work, embodying, acting as the gifts or the shadows of these different archetypes. And in doing this mirror work, I started to sort of extract these shadows from within me. And I eventually let go of the archetypes and just kind of started to do this intuitively, started working with other people, role playing, and found that we could very quickly and thoroughly complete stories within us, and that the feelings of the characters in these role plays would resolve themselves. Even if it's a fictional story, it's a real feeling. And so it gives people these, including myself, these experiences of completion. And that has been incredibly profound to me. And I like having some kind of system because it makes it replicatable. I can teach other people how to do it. Today, I'm a little bit less reliant on that system, but I still am very much into promoting it because I want other people to have tools. But you know, I'm quite intuitive today where I can navigate pretty easily with or without the system, but it's still really fun and it actually gives me a healing experience every time that I do it also. So that's one of my favorite things about it. That's
Love
called
it.
the
So
quantum theater. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, what was coming up for me while you were sharing that is this like element of like catharsis through like role playing or through storytelling. So I'm just curious, like, is that accurate with regards to the system, or yeah, just if you comment on that.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about it is a lot of the times, like, you know, we have grief stuck within us, and a lot of times, for me, what I've experienced is the best way to resolve grief isn't always crying, but it could be laughter. And so a lot of times I bring this sense of comedy into our belief systems and into grief specifically. And if somebody can laugh inside of the space of their grief, the laughter is like the body's natural breath work, and it basically expunges and clears out these these really dense thought forms that have accumulated, you know, in the lungs and the stomach and, you know, the throat, and it like pushes them out. And I've had such profound experiences because when this happens, I've experienced this probably 1,000 times, where I'll push out a thought form and I'll like literally hear it hit the wall in my room, and just blows my mind every time. Like, is this really happening? But it is so consistent that the density of these things are like, it's really like objects, and being able to purify our body of these, you know, unpleasant, unnatural, unhealthy objects has been incredibly fascinating to me. And so, yeah, as I was telling you before we started recording, I'm starting to integrate the perspective of Toltec shamanism a little bit into this, and it kind of helps me reverse engineer what I've been discovering myself and to see what I've been doing from a different lens. And yeah, it's amazing stuff. And I guess I'll just add, now I'm looking into I'm creating a consulting company to help people tell better stories like The Matrix affected me, so that they can go deeply into themselves to better reveal what has been holding them back, to better experience their own stories, so that they can have the wisdom from that experience and then put that into the story that they're creating. And that's kind of where my nervous system is kind of seizing up, like, holy shit, like I'm like really doing this. I'm really like mixing worlds here in a way, you know, bringing this into a sort of a mainstream context. And it's amazing, but also kind of freaks me out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could see that because anytime we do any sort of leveling up, right, there's always that part of us that doesn't want to go there because it's
Yeah.
keeping us stuck at familiar,
Yeah.
right? It has to die off. It has to be sacrificed to make room for the
Yeah.
other thing. So it's always going to pull us back. So it's one of those like kind of welcome to Team Human
Yeah.
type of experiences, right?
Totally.
We've all been there.
Totally. Yeah.
So just to kind of make sure that then I understand your process correctly, it sounds like the intersection between, let's just say, and this is my own understanding, guys, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like the intersection of like the somatic work you might get through, breath work or like role playing or any kind of shamanic experience combined with then, it seems like that opens up the space for the intellectual work to like bring the story out, release everything, see it in a new perspective, use those higher capacities to, reframe, let go, whatever the need be, so that people can move into the space that they've created by shedding all of this. Like, is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like I get the sense that the Matrix, for example, was sort of a channeled story that came through someone else's realization of their their life. And then, that kind of storytelling stands out very distinctly from something that's just a little bland. I just watched the what's it called? The Marvel Eternals movie the other day. It's like a $200 million movie, and I had to turn it off after 15 minutes because it was just so bland. It doesn't have that depth of inspiration. And also, just to throw out credit where it's due, I think that there was a African American woman who created a comic, and that she did not get the credit for inspiring the film of The Matrix.
Got it. Okay. So actually that part I did not know, but I
Yeah.
mean, given Hollywood, I would not be surprised if
Right,
that
right.
is
Yeah.
true. So, that is what it is. So what I'm curious then is, like, you come in with this depth of like lived experience, you come in with this depth of like coaching, teaching, facilitating experience, you know where you want to take people to. So what I'm curious about then is, given your business right now, sort of what are the biggest challenges that you find kind of bringing, what I'm assuming is like bringing this work to people? Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I was talking about this with my partner last night because it's hard for me to articulate it. The best I can do at the moment, and I'm open to feedback, of course, is it's like my left brain priorities and my right brain priorities. A part of me wants to impact the world by helping people tell better stories and coaching them, guiding them to do that. Another part of me, my right brain, is more interested in creating the stories, being a performer, being the writer, being the creator. And obviously I can only focus on one thing at a time, and oscillating between these two is challenging for me. I get the sense there's like a shame barrier that is hard for me to cross, which is why going back and forth is difficult. I work at the enneagram system, and in the enneagram system, my ego fixation is a type 3, which is the center of the heart triad, which is also called the shame triad. And so, of the 9 types on the system, I think that the type 3 experiences more suppressed shame than any other type.
Got it. Okay. So in that case, there's, I guess, two ways that I can reflect that back to you. So one is, I have all these systems and skill sets that I have. So I have the Enneagram knowledge, I have, the story knowledge, I have the kind of somatic knowledge. I'm trying to combine all of them. And I have this challenge between the left brain, the right brain. Like, do I create? Do I serve? How do, and like, where do I interconnect?
Yeah.
That's a legit concern. And, you could argue that it's a concern about clarity, like where is the intersection amongst all of these, right? Like, you can view that through the lens of like business, like, okay, so what's my messaging, what's my positioning, who's my avatar, what's my offer with regards to the intersection of all of these, right? What's interesting though is that is not how this came about, right? It didn't come about as like, well, I'm not clear. I have all these skills. How do I put them together? That comes up often. That's legit. But it didn't come out that way. It came out as like, I have all these skills. I do all these things. I have all this experience. But then there's like shame that isn't allowing me to put it together. Okay. Which generally doesn't kind of fall into that mix. So I'm just curious for you, why do you think that the shame interconnects, or I guess blocks where the intersections are?
Yeah. I mean, at the moment, the best way I can say it is like, the type 3, the sin of the type 3 is self-deceit. And so it feels like there's this treasure chest that I'm just like dancing around. And sometimes I go into it and the experience of it is like ecstatic. And it just feels like, wow, I could just live in here. This is crazy. And then the shame is is what kind of pulls me out of that. So in that, like, let's say when I'm meditating, et cetera, and I'm in higher states of consciousness, I can clearly see you mentioned, the intersection of the right brain and left brain priorities are, it ends up kind of being the coaching people to create amazing stories by giving them an amazing story, right? It's like everything in one. But when I'm back into like my normal state of consciousness, I have this experience of these being separate, and my shame is like nudging me, like, work hard, grind away, do something productive today. And then my inner child is like, please do something creative, please have fun, please experience what you're really on earth for, instead of worrying about this and that. And so does that reveal a little more?
No, that makes absolute sense. And what's coming up for me is like the intersection to clarity is safe to be experienced in kind of the nebulous realms, right? Like when I'm meditating, when I'm outside of my 3D experience in some ways, then like this stuff flourishes. It blossoms. I can see it. It's great. I want more of that. Where it doesn't feel safe is when you're back in your body and kind of doing day-to-day things. So just before I go on, like, is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. So why do you think it's safe in one realm but not in the other?
As I experience it, it's like I'm either on this side of the shame or I'm on this side of the shame. And when I'm embracing that experience of myself, when I'm on the far side of the shame, it gives me this, I'm in a state of no worry, right? And when I'm on the trap side of the shame, my identity is one of, I must be effective, I must be productive, and it's more agenda driven. Where on the other side, it's more genuine, let's say the authentic impulse of my creativity.
Okay, so I think that's a great explanation of your kind of experience going through like one versus the other.
Yeah.
Right. But the original question was, why do you think it feels safe to experience the benefit of this in like the nebulous realms, like let's say more 5D realms? And why does it not feel safe in the 3D ones?
Why, meaning like, what do I believe in the 3D realm that makes it appear that way?
Yeah, like what comes up for you as like it's not like I can see this, I can visualize it, I can taste it in this kind of non-furl kind of way, like non-3D way.
Yeah.
But as soon as I want to bring that here, I get these observations and these very eloquent and nicely put descriptions of an experience that just dances around something. So it's like, well, what I had over there, it's not safe here.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It's the self-worth thing, right? It's the as I experience it more and more deeply, it's like this furnace of it's the best way I can describe it is passion perceived through a dirty lens, which makes it appear as self-hatred.
Got it. Okay. So that's interesting. So the dirty lens is what you put on once you kind of bring yourself back into your body
Yeah.
and you have to do like the day-to-day things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. So tell me more about the dirty lens then. Well, what do you think that's all about?
I work with polarities, and one of the polarities that stands out to me from my conditioning in childhood is the polarity of clean and dirty. And a lot of time, let's say when I'm relating to my family, I have this sense of I'm not just the black sheep of the family, but I'm like the dirty sheep of the family. And that's kind of what comes to me.
Got it. So everything's painted dirty. So this pureness that you can experience when you're meditating and in different states, as soon as I bring that in, it can't possibly be that pure in me right now because like I'm just dirty. So it's just going to get muddled up.
Right. And, different, since I work with enneagram types, different types have different assumptions about what they are. Like type 1 is afraid they're evil. Type 8 is afraid they're not protected. Type 3 for me is basically what you work with is I'm not enough. And so for me, I experience that as being tainted is a good word. It's a sense of, if you give me something, I'm going to mess it up somehow. I'm going to like intellectually, I trust myself and I do a lot of great things, but oftentimes I have to go through this hurdle of that's not true. That feeling of being not just an imposter, but like a troublemaker, and I'm also kind of sensing there's a lot of anger there, and it's sort of like I'm afraid that my anger is going to, like the dirty lens of my anger is going to come out and taint my whole experience, and then I'm going to lash out at somebody I care about. I'm going to so it's kind of like compartmentalizing the good me and the bad me.
Right. So it taints all aspects, right? Like I can't just have pure anger and like release it, because if I do, it'll be dirty anger. It'll screw up somebody else, it'll fuck up something else. So there's no way that I can even have not just the pure essence of like my vision, but the pure essence of my emotion. Mm-hmm. So would that be accurate?
Yeah. And feeling the anger, I've received training of like, when that anger comes up, you have to feel it, be with it. It will transmute. My system, I have such a distance from it. It's like, do not feel this, because this is like, feeling this is what makes you a bad person.
Yeah, I get that. And it's interesting that you mentioned the distance bit, because one of the things that I was also going to prompt at is like, if you were to rewind our conversation up until this point, every single time I ask you a question, it's not answered from the third person, but it's answered like you answering on your behalf while looking at the issue through glass.
Yeah, right? I hear that often, but I don't cognitively like the best way I can describe is that's the only way I know how to be. And I have this like I'll give you an image that I've used to discuss this before. Is it's like if you imagine like a carousel, and this is typical for a type 3 because the type 3 is given away their core identity. So if you imagine like a carousel, there are all these different animals, and if the true me is the center of the carousel, it's like I have to ride an animal to be able to, it's like I have to wear a mask, and that there's no other way for me to experience myself when I'm in my ego fixation. So yeah, you're right on with that.
Right. So then you have a deep understanding of it, you're quite aware of it, but this sentiment of like, that's the only way I know how to be, right? Like riding the carousel looking in, is that actually true?
Well, like I said, when I'm in higher states of consciousness, that's not the case, but I have to, it takes me some work to be able to move into that space. And if actually when I'm coaching somebody, it's really easy for me. That's like one of the few times, situations where it's easy for me to be authentic. But when I am in any other kind of thing that I'm not, where I'm not meditating, it's like this safety of a mask is totally normal for me.
I would 100% agree, because if you're coaching somebody, you're not having to look inside, like all of your
Yeah.
attention is to the other, right? So
Mhm.
it's this quality, like not the distortion of it, but like the one you're experiencing, like it makes for great coaching because your presence is so focused on the other, but it is distorted because it's actually presence that you don't want to give yourself, right? So it's easier to give it to the other. And
Mhm.
then as far as the sentiment of like even the enneagram or any of the other analogies you used,
Mhm.
I'm not surprised this is how you operate, because every single ounce of you does not want to embody the center, right? Like
Mhm.
you're okay being out there in meditation, but until you begin to not just personalize, but like really internalize like the center and accept that that is the core of what is going on here,
Mhm.
then not much is going to change externally, right? So how does that land for you?
Yeah, yeah. Same thing that I've come to. I've had very powerful, like, let's say, psychedelic journey, where I fully embodied everything, every last drop of what I am, and what eventually I was loving it. What eventually brought me back into my uh, chronic nervous system is the thought that if I remain this powerful, I will not be relatable. If I remain this powerful, um, I will have some kind of responsibility that I don't want. Like it's like a fear of being revered or something like this. It was such a backward sort of set of beliefs that I wasn't aware that I had, and I can't logically understand. And it's obviously designed to keep me small and in this show. And so I've experienced both sides, and I'm here because I don't know what's next.
Well, I mean, I would say it goes one step beyond small. It's like it actually keeps you dirty.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
and almost non-existent.
well, and the other, like the goodness you experience in other states, that pureness, right? If you were to bring that down into your experience, if you were to live it, if you were to embody it, if you were to think, feel, and act in accordance with those sentiments,
Mhm.
there's cleanliness there.
Yeah.
And that goes against the very core of your being right now, which is so convinced that you are dirty, broken, not good, like whatever the
Yeah.
verbiage is,
Yeah.
that it is hijacking all of your capacities
Mhm.
and using your strengths in a distorted way to make sure you never actually look there.
Yeah, it's addicted actually to coaching.
Right. It is, because again, then you never have to look at yourself. So
Yeah.
it
And
really
actually that's actually a beautiful thing is for me to realize is one of the reasons that I don't want to move forward with my coaching practice is because I can see that I am addicted to it, and that if I become really successful and blah, 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 I will be cementing this pattern in me. And that's sort of the resistance to moving forward with it.
I would agree, because if you're successful at this, it means you got to bring some of that pureness into your day-to-day experience. But I think the other part is, then you also, like, to be successful, at some point people are going to call your shit, and you're going to have to walk your own talk. Meaning, if you're going to prompt others to do the inner work to face the parts of themselves they don't want to face,
Yeah.
how can I go forward as the imposter when I'm not willing to do that myself? And I'm very, intellectually aware that that's what's going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Right. So
I want to be willing.
perfect. Well, I mean, this is kind of the first step for that. So
Yeah.
I would agree with you. Right.
Yeah.
So knowing all of that, what do you think would be the next step for you?
I mean, the process I've been going through with this is, I've been working through pockets of this with my partner, and it ends up a lot of the time getting into super intense pockets of anger or grief, crying. And so, I imagined that working through that eventually will work itself out. And I'm feeling, less like an imposter as I open up more of this being from that, from what I've been restricting myself of. However, it's not always the masculine energy that I crave, and being able to specifically delineate the beliefs that is underlying it and to challenge me, like, boom. Usually it's this, because I'm working through it with a woman, it's this sort of peaceful, loving, nurturing, and it's very beautiful, and I love that too. But it is an important balance for me to be able to, you know, strike in a way that is that prompts me to, bring up my own fire energy and bring up my own like what's it called? Iron sharpens iron, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I would agree with you on that. So to kind of then move in a different direction, if you couldn't think the thought that you were dirty or broken, what would you be?
Clean.
And how would that make you feel?
When that's not happening, it's this radiant joy and just gratitude is the key word there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't feel broken or dirty, what would you actually embody?
I would say the solution to any instance of that vibe, of broken or dirty vibe in the world.
So what, like, same question. So what would you embody?
As the solution, I would embody creativity.
So not as a solution, but as like Josh, Josh, like, I'm not dirty, I'm not broken.
Mhm.
I couldn't even think the thought. I couldn't put the idea of it in my head. What's there behind that?
Tapping into my genius is one of my favorite things to do, and that's one of the things, that's the only thing that stops me from that. And so when I tap into that genius and it's ecstatic and it's like big, um it feels, I love nothing more than that.
Okay, so that's a bit closer.
Yeah.
So if you got rid of the intellectualization of it.
I'm actually visualizing like a picture of myself. Do you want me to describe the picture?
So I want you to keep the picture active and just tune into that picture actually making its way into your body. And then what's there?
What's coming to me next is like just this savage beast that is also very kind and loving, but is and I guess this is actually what I'm afraid of, is this incredible power where I could just rip somebody's head off, but I'm choosing not to.
And what's so scary about that?
When it's fueled by anger, it's scary, but it's not scary if it doesn't have it, if I've forgiven whoever I need to forgive, which I'm actually not in touch with what that is exactly, maybe a little bit, but if there's no grudge to be held, it's not scary.
Okay, because the original image was, I'm so powerful, but I have the wherewithal to have the choice to like be responsible with that power. That is freaking me out. And then when I asked you what's freaking you out about that, you went into forgiveness. So what's the relevant of the forgiveness, and or like, do you want to try answering the same question again?
Let's see. You're saying, what about the responsibility freaks me out? Is that what the question should be?
Sure.
Okay, so yeah, this is interesting. I don't know how to articulate this exactly, but it's like, I'm afraid that everybody is going to want me. I'm afraid that everybody's going to want a piece of me. And what's coming up is like, I don't trust myself to have boundaries around, to be able to say no to people's desires when it comes to my energy.
Got it. So it'll be too much for me to handle all of this power.
Yeah, it'll like,
The demands on my, like when people start to see it, when people start to see me shine, it'll get so overwhelming that I'll actually crumble with all this power.
yeah, pretty much how if you see like a child star or a celebrity, like they're in the limelight, then they just lose it because they have all this influence and they don't know what to do with it.
Correct. That makes sense. Is that really true though?
About me?
About you and that power?
I don't think it's really true. I think it's a logic that came about due to not wanting to forgive certain grudges.
Okay, got it. So yeah, that's, I think it's unearthing another piece of this, right? And I know there's like a, every time we kind of dig that there's always like another layer. So just for the sake of like, this recording, etc., there's a few things I just want to reflect back, and then you can let me know how that lands for you, right? Like there's a sentiment of the lens, right? There's a sentiment like the dirty lens. There's a sentiment of the responsibility that comes with the power that's behind that lens. And then there is, more doom and gloom fear of, if I embrace that power, what happens, right? So all in all, it's just this one big thing circling around this core bit of like, I know I'm better than all of this, but if I tap into it, everything's going to fall apart.
Mhm.
The irony of that sentiment is everything's kind of falling apart right now, not embracing it, right? And where you're saying, okay, I recognize that it's not true. I think what you're avoiding though is embracing and embodying what that actually means in terms of consequences, i.e., okay, it's not true, but what is true is I'm actually living the consequences of all of that derailing right now without ever actually tapping into this power and testing out that assumption to begin with. Because I already see my results right now and they're not what I want. What is there to lose? And I know it's kind of like the intellectual bit, but I think it's the embodiment and the feelings surrounding that where like you have to look further. So I just want to know, how does that land for you with regards to that?
Could you just articulate the assumption that you're hearing so I can listen to that?
Which assumption?
You just mentioned an assumption and like basically like something, yeah. My own stuff is like I said, circling around the truth here. So if you could just hit me with the belief I'm assuming is true from your perspective, that would be cool.
So in that case, I would say, you're well aware of like the patterns and the brokenness, and maybe had some extra light with regards to how that's implicating you right now, and that's fine. What I think is really at the core of the issue is, because your pattern is to always circle, what you're always doing is just creating a high resolution problem. So the way you can think about this is like, okay, you're aware of these particular things. It's like drawing an outline of a house. And you're like, okay, I understand my problem, but nothing's really fixed in my like day-to-day life. So I must not be fixed enough. So now you draw the house outline, but now you start to like shade things in. Like you put in a window, you put in a door, you start to shade everything out. You're like, okay, I understand this problem better, but nothing's really ever fixed. So like I'm still kind of living things I don't want to live. I still not able to manifest the things that I want and create the things that I want. I must not be looking hard enough. There's a bigger problem. So now you like bust out the crayons and or like the colors, and you begin to like paint this beautiful picture of this house. But like you knew it was a house from the beginning when you just had the outline.
Mhm.
Yet all of your faculties are thrown into, whether it's psychedelic journeys, whether it's more exploration, it's more breath work, like you just keep going to create this higher resolution problem, not recognizing that the deeper you look, the more you will find, right? So like you can spend your life creating the highest resolution problem possible, or you can actually look the other way and say, I understand what the problem is. Now I have to exercise the courage to, like, I've let go of the chain, but now I have to walk in freedom.
You got to move
And
into the
you're,
house.
yeah, like you're not willing to walk in. It's like if the healing is I'm letting go of the chains,
Mhm.
like I see what the chains are, I'm going to let them go. I've healed.
Yeah.
That's great, but life requires walking. And
Mhm.
right now you're so focused on healing. Every time the resistance hits you, as far as like walking into your freedom, you misinterpret the resistance for more healing, which given your faculties, given your history, you just find more things to heal because you're so good at it, right? So it's
Well,
like
I
I'm
don't know if
playing the
I,
wrong game type of deal.
yeah, I don't, I'm open to understanding what you're saying. I don't know if I'm like in it for the idea that I need to be more healed. It's more like for me, it's body pain that is like when I'm trying to do something, it's like distracting me because it's just pulling on me so hard. One of my teachers describes the issue as you have like a bunch of cans of food and you're reading the labels, but you're not opening it and tasting the food.
It's similar, right? So it could just be a case of semantics. I use healing here as like, okay, I'm like that, always creating a higher resolution problem. Like even if it's just like I understand myself better,
Yeah.
that's just like shading in the house a lot more,
Yeah, no, I
right?
agree with you. And I really want to move my attention into the experience of it, every time I do it, it's just like it just dodges it. So this kind of intellectual exploring, what I'm doing in this is like I'm poking around to see what concept actually like triggers me and allows me to say that resonates, because I'm pretty good at turning my intellectualness into emotion if it really clicks and resonates. You know what I mean?
I would agree with you on that. And then I would also play devil's advocate and say that's the exact quality that's keeping you from not walking.
Okay, so that's what I need to hear. So can you help me see that? Because that's kind of, to me, that seems like the opposite of the way forward.
I totally agree, because again, it's so rooted in the pattern of the past that it's like, well, no, I just got to do more of this because
Yeah,
that's kind of what I've always done, right? So
yeah.
it kind of boils down to what I asked you previously, where it's like, if I couldn't think these thoughts, who would I be?
Mhm.
Another way to put it in this context is, if you already know that you're powerful, what if you just acted powerfully?
Mhm.
And then you're going to get hit with these waves after waves and turbulence of resistance.
Mhm.
And if you just exercise the courage to accept that resistance, but do the actions anyway, and forget about figuring stuff out, you figured out enough.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And it's the accepting the resistance aspect, which is confusing for me, because a lot of the time, like, this stuff is so physical. I'll actually start vomiting if I move with this courage, and I have a lot of resistance to doing that.
100%. So the
Yeah.
the image that comes into my head is like the, stage performer who vomits after every or before every performance, before
Yeah.
every, whatever.
Yeah.
They feel the resistance, they vomit, and then they go out and the show must go on.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean,
Right? It's simpler than your mind wants to make it,
yeah.
because the more complex you make it, the more shading of the house you do.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm my partner makes fun of me, like nobody, for nobody else do I know that vomiting is like good news.
Yeah. And that, listen, the fact that you have that relationship with it is good, because there's a lot of purging that can be done with vomiting, right? In your instance, what I would also just look at is like, maybe the vomiting is just more resistance.
I don't know, but I mean,
You know,
it's like I'm not choosing it consciously.
I listen. I'm pretty sure anyone just wants to vomit for fun. So I agree with you on that. It just, I think, that is not going to go beyond like the context of like what we can do in
Yeah.
this container.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just want to know from your vantage point, like, given what we've covered today, like, does this feel complete for you? Or is there still something left outstanding?
Um, well, I'll share. It's kind of a higher resolution problem now. Um, the I suspect I could go with the opportunity facing me more directly intellectually here. I can probably go deeper into it on my own after we hang up. Um, part of me is like, I want to just go deeper into it and feel it together right now. And I don't know what kind of time or energy that would take, but that's two ways of doing it.
Agreed, right? And then again, I should play devil's advocate. I would say do the exact opposite of what you would normally do. I think that's really where much more of your progress is actually going to lie. Just to, again, not go back and rehash that same pattern, right? So in that instance, right, just because we're going to kind of close this off, if you could just kind of summarize your experience of, what this was like for you to kind of go through it, what your takeaways were, what your understandings were, just to kind of close us off in your own words.
So it's still like not fully clicked in, but I'll share as much as I
Sure.
can. So I have a tendency to, because I don't believe that I'm enough, I have a tendency to want to improve myself in order to define in more and more high resolution exactly why I'm not enough, rather than entering into that energy courageously and letting go of the typical meaning of it, and using it to fuel genuinely powerful actions rather than actions that are based in I'm not enough.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's I couldn't have summed it up better myself. That's exactly kind of what I was getting at. So yeah, I'm glad that that's what came up for you. I thank you for coming on here to to do this. So to just then close us off, why don't you let everybody know, who's the best person to find you? Where's the best place for them to find you? Like, floor is yours for sharing all of your stuff.
Oh, sure. Thanks. My healing modality is called the quantum theater. Website is quantum.theater, spelled the American way with TER at the end. The quantum theater is evolving now into being one of the tools of my new story weaving consultancy, which is website is storyweaving.media. And it's a 4-step process for going deeper into our unconscious and finding and resolving unconscious stories so that we can take the emotional pillars of those stories and create really impactful transformational stories for an audience.
Beautiful. So we'll include all of those, like the links and stuff to all that in the descriptions in the show notes.
Cool.
Josh, thank you very much for being on. And for everybody else listening, we'll see you all in the next one.
Thank you, Dresco. Appreciate it.